It is, after all, Yom Kippur, the time of year when we focus on saying, Slicha, I'm sorry. But more importantly, oftentimes we ask for forgiveness. But if you think about it, when we look around in society for examples of good apologies, and oftentimes really we seeing people giving forgiveness, it's kind of hard to see. After all, there have been plenty of examples of really bad apologies. I mean, just think about it. We know of corporate apologies for data breaches or poor advertising choices, Pepsi. We can also even think about politicians making bad apologies. Governor Cuomo this past summer with his famous non-apology apology. And yet our rabbis teach us that those apologies, they're not real apologies. Our rabbis say specifically that two things have to happen if we injure somebody. Not only do we have to make reparations, like pay their medical bills or help give them financial compensation, but we also have to say, I am sorry. And the truth of the matter is, though, it's kind of hard for us to make apologies. After all, we might feel that by doing so, we could be afraid. It is fearful to say I'm sorry. How's the other person, after all, going to react? Maybe they're not going to accept our apology. We might be embarrassed or ashamed of how we acted in that one moment. And if we really admit what we're doing, they might see us as weak, or they have some sort of an edge over us. Maybe we're admitting to a fault, and that's kind of a scary thing. After all, when we say we're sorry, in a way we have to swallow just a smidgen of pride. And for many of us, that is hard to do. Rabbi Kushner offers some suggestions just to get the ball rolling. And for him, he teaches that in order for us to say we're sorry, we have to apologize first to ourselves. We have to acknowledge that we were not brought up by perfect parents, and that we have some things in our own self that's a little bit broken. We had at times perhaps a difficult childhood, times a challenging community, at times other things that hurt us, and we need to allow ourselves to forgive ourselves for not being perfect. That way we can also forgive others for their lack of perfection. So that's one trick of the trade. But there are other tricks when we think about how do we make a good apology. It's not just about forgiving us. There's certain key factors that need to come into play. When was the last time, I'll ask you, that you actually made and received a good apology? And I'm not talking about the apologies that my kids give me as they're screaming through the hall, "Sorry, Mom," for offending one of their siblings. Nor am I talking about the sorry, not sorry apology that's become so famous. It's even a song about it now, where we can kind of hear and laugh and see that oftentimes we'll say, hey, we're sorry, but not quite really that sorry for doing what we did. And I want to share with you how important it is in the eyes of Judaism by giving you a story or a midrash about it. There's actually, this is just so you know, a combination of a few different midrashim, but the point is very powerful. And it goes something like this, that after the very first Shabbat of creation, after God created the sun and the moon, the stars, the beasts of the fields, the fish in the sea, God started going through a final checklist to make sure that God said and did every little thing. Each item off the checklist, of course, makes some sort of an intuitive sense, like a rainbow after a flood, the ram being caught in the thicket just so that it was available to Abraham right before he sacrificed or was about to sacrifice Isaac, the sea knowing exactly when to split so the Israelites can march on through, manna raining down from heaven in the wilderness, and even the creation of the Garden of Eden itself. Yet one item stood out that God had yet to create before that very first Shabbat. God didn't rest until he or she had created repentance. As if God knew that the world could not exist. Humanity could not exist, could not endure, unless we had the capacity to say, I'm sorry. There's no question arriving that comes to that moment for God, we had to say, I'm sorry. And let's be aware that it wasn't just, I'm sorry, it was sorries that could be back all the way from Kekedem, all the way from the very first days. And I want to give you an example of just how powerful those apologies can be. This past summer, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League CEO, apologized without caveat for opposing the building of an Islamic center near Ground Zero. He said, quote, "We can't change the past, but we accept responsibility for our unwise stance on Cordoba House, apologizing without caveat and commitment to doing our utmost going forward, to use our expertise to fight anti-Muslim bias as allies." What's powerful about Greenblatt's apology is that he did not undercut his predecessor, ADL's previous chief, Abraham Foxman, though at times we can see that in a way it was, but what he was really getting at was a 20-year-old apology in the making and in need, and it made a huge difference. I want to offer another example, albeit this one kind of fictional, but I think it's very poignant. I don't know if you've seen the movie or the TV show on Apple Plus, Ted Lasso. It's about an American football coach who goes across the pond to become a coach of a premier English soccer team. And the owner of the team who hired him did so with the understanding and belief that by doing so, she would pretty much destroy her team. She used many people along in the process, and Ted got pulled in as an unsuspecting person. She did so because she wanted to get back at her husband, who they were now divorced, and this team was his pride and baby. But as the season comes to a close, she realizes that the path that she had chosen was the wrong one. Revenge, not such a great idea, and she makes amends, not just with him, but fully confessing before several other characters, building a stronger team and creating better relationships with those around. Well, we're not in major moments in our lives like the ADL, nor do we have an own premier soccer leagues. But I think that the Yom Kippur liturgy that we read through this morning offers us a litany and list to help remind us of all of the ways that we have done wrong and all of the avenues available to us to apologize. And so I want to present just a few ideas of how to go about making that fabulous apology that you're just waiting to do as soon as service is at. Don't forget, it has to have at least 4 components, according to psychologists, and here they are. We have to acknowledge the offense, meaning really state out what was done wrong. We have to offer an explanation of intent, what we were hoping to achieve, seeing how we simply missed the mark. We have to offer further expressions of remorse, shame, humility, sincerity. And lastly, some argue there could be a 3B here. Acknowledge how it made the other person feel. And step 4, reparations, how we're not going to make the same mistake twice. So these are what we need to do to make apologies. And I think by doing so, make better relations with those around us. But don't forget, we also have to apologize to ourselves for not necessarily being there for us all the time. So may this Yom Kippur, as we read through all of these viduis and these long lists of ways that we could have offended somebody, inspire us, give us strength, give us courage to know that by apologizing, we're not really weakening ourselves, we're not giving somebody an edge, but we are enhancing that relationship and making ourselves a better and more whole person. Kenny Hiratzon, may this be God's will.